Hello, let me set my timer and uh check my notes for a while. Okay. Okay, before I start my speech, a quick shout out to my teammates that without them, for sure we won't reach finals. So like I'm really thankful. At the same time, I thank my seniors for letting us come in this competition. I'm very proud to be the Prime Minister, the first Speaker of Government side. And okay, the pronouns are he, him, and then I prefer POI verbally. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so basically in my speech is really simple. I'm going to be wrapping up all our main case. At the same time, I will be giving the main setups, the main stakeholders, the characterizations. At the same time, give burden of proof counterfactual. I will also give the main argument and main case of our side and give layers of analysis with impacts as well. So let's move directly into the characterizations. So a few things I want to characterize here. First thing is elections. So basically elections, right? It's a voting season to choose a new political party for the government, where this might last a long time from weeks to even months. As you can see, there's many campaigns and all those for those elections. So it uses lots of resources, uses lots of time and all those. At the same time, I'm going to characterize economical crisis. So what are economical crisis? So economical state economical crisis is basically an economical state in the country where it is not stable and holds extreme importance. So next I'm going to characterize suspend. So basically suspend is temporarily withhold something that will return after the crisis is solved, basically just delaying it until something is solved. So let's move into the main stakeholders. The main stakeholders are just the people in the nation, the society. The burden of proof of our side is basically just to prove why suspending elections during economic crisis and focusing on the crisis instead of the election is actually an extremely crucial thing to do. So the counterfactual is simple. During an economical crisis, right, we suspend all elections from happening, thus giving time to focus on economical crisis. Helping to solve such crisis is also what people in the nation wish for, right? And it's only right to prioritize such crisis as it is the most beneficial idea for our stakeholders. And it must be taken into account that what people of the nation want and how these decisions of prioritizing elections or solving the crisis affects these people, our stakeholders. Okay, let's move on into our argument. So basically, our main argument is just by suspending these elections and let the state, let the country, let the nation recover faster from these economical crisis. So a few layers of analysis. The first layer is the problem analysis, pretty simple. So the problem analysis, people and those political parties, right, would be prioritizing on elections if it was not suspended at all. So political parties in control of government would likely prioritize gaining support from supporters instead of handling the crisis on their hands. The crisis would become even worse at those times because political parties are actually want those what is it called? Political positions, political powers in this whole society. It is only reasonable that these political parties want to maintain their positions and all those, and will mostly just directly focus on the elections instead of the crisis that the whole state, the whole nation is gonna go through right now. So basically, a few things I want to say. Basically, in elections, right? Uh, the electors will be holding lots and lots of campaigns, using big amount of money and resources for the government to let the people vote for them. This is rather wasteful. Instead of using this money, right, you can actually use those money to focus on the crisis. But they are using all those money that could be focused on the crisis for those elections, for holding campaigns and all those. So yeah, now the next thing I'm gonna say is the political parties, once they don't suspend the election, will mostly not focus on the economical crisis. Instead, will focus on those, like I stated just now a lot. Okay, the fact that it's an economical crisis doesn't mean it's actually the government, the leaders wrong, that they messed up something. It isn't totally their fault. So there's some cases, I mean, there's a lot of cases that leads to economical crisis is because of some natural depletion and all those things happening, which is sometimes mostly natural. At the same time, it might be because of the people not contributing much to the society, and it's not mostly because of the, what is it called, the political party at all. So the fact that it's an economical crisis, right? The people at that time for sure are suffering with the economical crisis as well. They are unable to get those stable income and all those, because like economical have economical crisis. Yeah. So basically the government, right? They already lack resources at those times. And I'm gonna tell you something, the fact that you are going to focus on elections, right, is totally very bad. It's making things really, really worse. It's making this even worse than usual, because once they are already lacking all these resources, right, and then you are using all these limited resources for those things that elections that doesn't really solve those economical crises, it will make the whole situation even worse. Instead, it will make people doubt whether they want to still live in this whole country, this whole nation. So the main solution is pretty simple. The solution is just basically suspending all these elections for those, what is it called, economical crisis. So why suspending at these times are really important. So suspending is needed so these political parties, right, in the government can focus on solving these crises instead of going to holding campaigns and all those for the elections. So as stated in my problem analysis, that people and even those political parties will mostly focus on those things. So it's more important for us to be focusing on the economical crisis right now instead of the election. So if insisting on elections during these times, it is only proven to hinder the progress to solve these crises, and I will extend it more on my second speaker speech. So the next thing is, it gives times and resources for us to be focusing on these economical crises. So the people are actually having all these problems, right? Like I stated in my problem analysis, these people are actually having these problems, and the government department is not actually doing something really good for them. They are actually holding campaigns if they don't suspend the elections, and making the whole thing worse, right? They're actually suffering in this economical crisis. These people, these stakeholders are actually suffering. Basically, if the government is doing some things that is not beneficial to the economy at all, the fact that they are holding election campaigns, etc., the people won't just lose faith in that current leader and all those. They instead they will might doubt whether they should continue living in this world. So yeah, the impact is simple. In our side, since elections are suspended, political parties in governments can focus their attention on solving such crises. In opposition side, they are actually wasting both time and resources to elections, hindering the progress of such crises. And I am very, very proud to propose.
Okay, I think Prime Minister for that fine speech. Also, guys, to remember that POIs are highly encouraged, so please do give and accept them. Great. Now inviting LO to start off the opposition case. You're here.
Am I audible and visible?
Visible, yes. Audible, not really.
Oh, now. Testing, testing.
Yeah, I guess this is fine.
Just give me a few seconds to arrange my notes here. Okay, with that, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We are for a world where the citizens get to pick a person who they put their trust in, a person where they can put their hopes in, and where they can actually hope to get out of this economic crisis. For a few levels of framing here, right? Number one, what will actually happen when these elections are suspended? We tell you 3 things. Number one, the regular elections are skipped. Like obviously, the past leader stays in power. Obviously, this is quite given. They are likely going to be happy because they don't need to campaign or anything, right? Or to get re-elected, and they're just like sit tight in the White House or something. And they're likely not going to be scared of getting voted out because there's no elections anyway. This means that they are not held accountable by the electorate. Who appeal in this, I'll explain on this later. And because of this, right, they will abuse like this period of crisis and kind of like slack off. But I'll explain on this later. But number two, what will our side actually look like? Obviously, our side has elections. It looks like elections where people get to choose the person where they see fit, where that they get voters, they make campaigns, they make promises in those campaigns. And let me tell you that they can actually be held accountable to improve the situation. Not everyone can pick like who they want to elect as a leader to improve the situation. Therefore, it's democracy where the people have a choice. But why are these elected people actually held accountable? It's because things like backlash from the press, their followers, political like parties, and even the court can be held like can hold them accountable if they do not uphold to the promises that they made in the campaigns. Therefore, it becomes a competition between the political parties. Which side can get the most votes and in turn make the most promises that benefit the most people in the economic crisis. This means there's going to be more innovation about what we can do to help the economic crisis, more developed discussion that actually leads to the decision being made, which I think is way more valuable than whatever they are proposing. But let me tell you here a few things, right, about responses. Number one, they said that the country will recover faster from this economic crisis if they suspend this elections, because the political parties, if they in elections only like want to gain votes and want to like campaign, which wastes time. Let me tell you here that obviously to gain votes you have to campaign, and to campaign you must make promises and give like detailed plans on what you will do once you're elected for this economic crisis. This means that you give them plans, you give them what you're going to do, and the citizens vote on what they want. This means you can not only see what the citizens want and therefore concentrate on what they want, or you can also let them elect who they see fit and who they want to put their hopes in, and they are held accountable for what they say or what they promise to do. As I have said before, that you get backlash for all these things, and they can also be held in court if they make like false promises, right? In the end, it's all for the better. But number two, they said that it's expensive and you should use the money for elections on the economic crisis. Let me tell you, even if it is expensive, it is really worth it. It's money for discussion about this economic crisis and ways to like curb it, and innovation. It's money for like innovation and promises to help the crisis. It's money for a leader that the people want. It's money for continuing on in the economic crisis without the citizens say is definitely like worse than whatever we're saying. Because what we are saying is that we must have a person that the people pick, that the citizens trust and put their hope in, which pushes them to improve in the first place, which pushes them to actually work harder to get through this economic crisis anyway. We need a symbol that the people trust, that the people put their hopes in, who is held accountable for the plans and promises that they want to make. I tell you here, this is way better than whatever they are saying. But now my arguments, right? Number one, about democracy. Suspending like elections is simply just going to undermine the entire concept of democracy on their side, which causes citizens to be like sort of unable to actually speak up about their opinions about the country, right? We think that the citizens are likely going to view this suspension of elections as a loss of right to political expression in the future cases as well. We think that it's important citizens retain their rights of freedom of speech in status quo, and that we are willing to trade off the time it takes or the money it takes as a harm, so long as everyone is in agreement to a solution and they put their trust in the person that they believe in, and they pick a person that they firmly believe is going to get them out of this crisis. But now on number two, right, about lack of accountability. On government side, the people cannot be the political party cannot be held accountable by the electorate, because this means that they're probably not feel much pressure or expectations to meet, as they are not scared to be like voted off. Simply put, they do not have the incentive to work as hard to restore the economy because they are not held accountable, or they are not scared of getting votes. We think that leaders in government side world are going to be held less accountable because they do not have the fear of not being re-elected. Sure, you can say they will face backlash, but we still think that public shaming is not actually an effective incentive to ensure that these leaders will enforce change, so long as they never made any promises, so long as they never made any campaigns. And because of this, they cannot be held accountable if they never made any like promises. They just tell the press that I am doing my best, and then that's all they're going to do. I think accountability here is very important, and the difference here is made very clear on our side. But what does a world without this look like then? I think it looks like less politically stable country or less politically stable economy, because less accountability obviously means like likely less change in the long run, right? We think that side government needs to prove how they actually plan to cater to these issues should elections be suspended. The issues of less accountability and less guarantee that this person will actually help and do their best because they're not scared of anything and they can just sit tight in their White House enjoying their free drinks, right? But democracy as a policy is also likely to be abandoned too on their side. We feel that citizens are not likely to get a voice in other political activities if elections are to be suspended. Like people are more likely to feel dissatisfied when they are restricted from their rights to address certain matters. They will do things like backlash, like I've said, and to do like press if their freedom of expression is stifled. But why is continuing elections good? Several layers of analysis here. Number one, we think that elections serve as a competition and incentive between leaders to gain votes. This way, they are likely to put more effort into solving national issues and contribute to the country because they want people to vote for them. But number two, we tell you that leaders are more likely to be held accountable if they are elected as leaders of a nation. And we tell you that they are likely to increase risk of backlash if they do not see change, which brings me to my next argument. Because then not only the politicians can be held accountable, but also the government will know what the citizens want. When the politicians campaign for specific things, it will paint a clearer picture for what the citizens want, and then they can concentrate on those things in helping to solve the economic crisis. And number two, it's also a symbol that they have hope in. The symbol as a person that the citizens trust in and put their hope in, that they hope that they can get out of this economic crisis. Because the plans that they give them, the promises that they give them, they trust in him. And I think that symbol and all the reasons I stated before, all those benefits, for all those reasons, I firmly oppose. Thank you.
Thank you for that fine speech. Now inviting DPM.
Okay, thank you for having me on today. Okay. I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, first off, let's talk about rebuttals. Their first speaker only mentioned like 2 arguments that's like fleshed out a lot but can be easily rebutted to, which is the democracy. People want democracy, people want the choice, and they make the politicians be held responsible because of the vote they actually want to improve. I will rebut to the latter claim first. They'll mention that the current president will be happy that they'll stay in power. They'll not be held accountable by the election, and they'll actually slack off and not do the work that they actually are meant to do. I don't really see this as a valid point, as it doesn't really matter. If you just sit there and not do anything, the economy is gonna like crash anyway, and you're not gonna be a president anymore. If there's it's like a goose. I see a golden goose. My goose can lay a golden egg. If it gets AIDS, I'm gonna bring it to a vet. I'm not gonna ignore it. There's already an incentive in our world, and an incentive for governments to improve is actually not exclusive to their side. That's why you should not credit it. They also mentioned that democracy is good. It gives people what they want. But what people want is to actually not die. Would you rather die and be able to vote? No, you would rather live without the with the economical crisis going on. It's not long before the entire country shuts down if they don't take action. It's gonna be absolutely like horrible, and these people are not gonna like actually get what they want. The stakeholders, they're not actually gonna get what they want. What's the point of democracy when you're living like a North Korean citizen, eating grass every day? Okay, that's my rebuttals. They provided 2 points, and despite what they might like to say, not really much analysis, so I can't really rebut any further. Okay, I'd like to move on to my problem analysis, which also serves as a rebuttal to their overall case extension. My first speaker mentioned that I'll extend upon the point that people will get mad because of the economical crisis, which they mentioned people will actually get mad on their side instead. I'll say why they'll get more mad if we don't focus on the economical crisis. Okay, the country will not have enough money to provide citizens. If you can't eat, you can't vote. If you die, you can't vote. You die of starvation, you can't vote. There's no particular reason that you would choose voting over like starving. So like, I think overall, the people most probably would not like choose voting over like not getting enough money, not and getting high inflation. They will actually want to the country to actually elections often take like a few like weeks and days. They might take time to
Sorry, can you guys hear him?
Sorry, but because in our side of microphone, we cannot hear what he's saying. Is it okay if I allow him to use my device to speak?
Yeah, we paused the timer at 3:32.
Okay, you continue from 3:32. You continue what you said from 我们 stop 你那边啊. Okay, you use my headset. Okay. Hello? Okay. Uh, uh okay. Wait, let me get back to my original place. My docs. Okay. Okay. I'd like to continue on with my extensions. The country would not have enough money to provide the citizens. Thus they'll actually be more angry on our side than on your side, because you've been trapped. Example, you've been trapped in a desert for days, you're starving, and instead of and then you see Taco Bell and McDonald's in the middle of the desert. You're indecisive about eating which choice. No, you're gonna jump to the first restaurant you see. You're actually gonna try and fix the solution as fast as possible, thus fixing the people getting mad issue faster. Okay. Solution. We prioritize the people's grievances by actually looking at why they're mad, because they don't get enough food. They don't get enough money. They don't get and they get taxed too much. We actually do this by fixing the economy. We make it severely clear that their grievances are heard by us, and that we are restoring the country's economy, which is basically the backbone of the state, which I'm sure opposition can agree to, and agree that it is very, very, very important and should not be ignored. And that it's actually and oh, how we do this is basically stop the elections. Elections take campaign money, elections take time, they take too much time out of the government's hands, because both sides agreed on government wanting to keep their power, not wanting to like lose it, so they'll focus on the campaign. But in this scenario, they don't get the election, so they actually want to keep power by keeping these citizens happy, by actually fixing the economy. Okay, impacts. The people see the effort that we put in, and they would be more understanding and actually won't get as mad as on their side. And
Why?
yes.
We are giving you multiple reasons as to why leaders in your world are less likely to care about the citizens when they are already elected. How do you actually plan to ensure that the politicians or leaders are actually going to actually improve the economical crisis and give back to the people? Please engage.
I've already given like a rebuttal, like a 2-minute rebuttal to that. Basically, government, you have a golden goose, you don't want it to die. It lays golden eggs, you don't want it to die. When the economic crisis gets worse, you lose power. You don't want it to get worse, so you don't lose power. So you actually will try to actually fix the economical crisis, so you don't get kicked out of power. So basically it's like maintaining your power, keeping your golden goose alive. Like I gave the example just now in my rebuttal. I'm just repeating my rebuttal at this point. The impacts, continue with my impacts. They won't get mad, and the state won't get bankrupt. The state won't get bankrupt, and riots won't happen. And well, actually, our government will have more incentive to improve and be better. Okay, comparison, worst case scenario, the government faces criticism for lack of democracy, but overall, they still manage to put more effort into stability than the other side. And in contrast, the best case scenario, the government enters economical crisis faster than us if we do actually enter economical crisis, and recovery slows down. So overall, even in our worst case, we bring benefits that their side don't have. Okay, I end my speech here.
Okay, thank you, DPN, for the fine speech. Now inviting Diallo.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yes to both.
All right. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, during pressing times such as economic crises, we need people in power that actually care about change. We need people in power that actually want to better the country. Side government just doesn't suggest any way to ensure that the current politicians are going to be doing their best. Proud to oppose. So firstly, few key pieces of framing. So firstly, what is the true purpose of an election? So we tell you that elections are actually a means for the citizens to hold those in power, aka the politicians, responsible. We tell you that elections and campaigns are actually ways for these politicians to actually be accountable for their actions. It's also a fundamental democratic right that citizens should actually be able to voice their opinions on what actually happens in their society. So we tell you that we need these elections because this are what actually pushes these politicians to try their best. This is a check and balance in place to ensure that the politicians actually benefit the country. Secondly, what does the world where the elections are delayed look like? So we tell you that these authoritative figures now actually have no checks in place, have no one that holds them accountable during these pressing times. In these economic crises, politicians actually have less incentive to try their very best to help the country because they're going to be staying in power anyways. In turn, they become complacent and they don't do a good job resolving the economic crisis. This is true because politicians cannot actually be voted out during these times. There is no fear of losing power if they mess up. So thirdly, what is happening in status quo? So we tell you that in the current world, so many countries have already actually managed to solve their economic crises without suspending elections. The country can actually still solve and develop economically without needing to stifle democracy. So why are we taking away this fundamental right to democracy for no reason? So all side government is doing is providing politicians with a means to stay in power and abuse that power. They're undermining the checks and balances in place to ensure that they actually serve the country well. So now I have got 2 rebuttals. Okay, I'll take your POI.
How do you respond to my rebuttal where I said that government would want to maintain their economic stability, or they would be like basically kicked out of the government position because their country basically collapses? How do you respond to that?
Okay, thank you for the POI. I'll address it later. Okay, so I'll address it in my rebuttals. So firstly, on my rebuttals, what side government tries to push you is that campaigning is bad because it takes away attention and resources from the actual situation at hand. What they try to tell you is that campaigning and elections in general just leads to more time being wasted instead of actually solving the economic crisis. So they try to tell you that the resources get used and the situation becomes worse anyways. So however, if there are bad people in power, the situation isn't going to improve long-term anyways. So something that you have to understand is that once an election happens, the current government's plans are going to be questioned. The government has to be transparent about what they are doing to actually keep the public trust, right? So note this, a major part of being in power is that you have to be accountable. If you are accountable and transparent, you can let your words speak for yourself, and your campaigning isn't going to be as challenging as other smaller parties because you are already in power. This means that you can still devote a lot of your attention to actually solving the economic crisis at hand. So we tell you that during these campaigns, when all of the potential political candidates are all trying to outdo each other, we as citizens are actually able to see what are all the different strategies. So because of this, there's going to be more awareness around the topic. Naturally, with elections, there's going to be a lot of discussion and debate on what the best way to solve this economic crisis is, right? So this is going to be majorly positive for everyone because the economic crisis gets dealt with in the best way possible. Secondly, side government is trying to tell you that we should just let these politicians focus on the matter at hand. I'll take it later. So realize this, when you remove elections because you say they are distracting, what you are saying is that people's voices are distracting. What you are saying is that these people's voices don't matter. What government is trying to push you is that the people don't know what they want. They just don't want to die. So long as the government can keep them alive, they are going to be happy. What you're essentially doing is you're essentially demeaning and devaluing the citizens' voices in this time of crisis. When you suppress these elections, citizens no longer have a clear way of expressing their opinions. So we tell you that citizens are so important and must be listened to because they are the main stakeholders when it comes to a country's economy. So what SciGov wants is just a world where the current political party becomes complacent because no one is actually going to vote them out. They don't need to put their all into fixing the crisis. They are effectively stifling the citizens' voices who only want the best for their country. Understand that during economic crises, citizens already do not have a very big voice, right? By giving them this pathway to actually express their opinion, they actually have a say in what happens to the future of the country that they are in. However, even if we take side government's logic, where people are going to die if the politicians don't do something immediately, we tell you that this is better because at the very least, the people actually have a say in what happens to them. We tell you that democracy is fundamentally important because it directly affects the people, and those that are affected should have a voice in what happens. So I'll take your POI. 3, 2,
Okay.
1.
So the fact that you say, right, that you will have lots of debates and discussion, I have to ask you a question on that, because are you assuming that our side doesn't have discussion and debates as well? Because we're not in so many political parties, of course they will be discussing together. Are you saying that our side doesn't have discussion and debates as well?
Okay, we tell you that on our side, there's going to be a lot more awareness on scale because with elections, everyone in the country is going to be discussing and debating about this. So I'll start with my argument. So firstly, we tell you that citizens should have the right to vote on something that directly concerns them, right? We tell you that an economic crisis affects the whole country negatively, especially the citizens. We also tell you that because of this, they need to have the fundamental right to actually voice their opinions on something that directly concerns them. So what does this look like? We tell you that when an economic crisis happens, an election shouldn't be stopped because it is a means of citizens to evaluate whether the current party is actually doing a good enough job managing the crisis. The citizens obviously have the best interest of the country in mind and are likely to take the voting seriously. So if I'm like an adult living in the country, obviously I want to see it prosper, right? I'm going to be staying here in the country for a long time. Maybe I have kids. I want to see the country develop well. So the citizens are going to be very likely to actually properly evaluate who should be leading the countries in these times. So keep in mind that we are the only side that actually provides the chance for these citizens to actually express their opinions in the form of a vote. So secondly, we tell you that politicians are actually going to try their best to resolve the crisis if elections are kept. So we tell you that with these checks and balances in place, where the citizens actually have a voice to influence what is happening in the country, the politicians are likely to try a lot harder to actually keep their post. Because when an election comes, not only do new parties actually have to do the legwork to prove why they can offer better solutions to the crisis, the current party also has to try their best to keep in power. They need to show what they are doing to solve the crisis. We even tell you that because of this, we end up with a more competitive political landscape where all of these politicians are actually trying very hard to resolve these crises. Thirdly, I'll tell you why these leaders, after they are voted in, are likely to enforce change. So we tell you that those elected are going to be held accountable to their promises made during the election process by various stakeholders, for example, like the voters, like citizens in general, etc. So we push forward the fact that leaders are most likely going to work hard to enforce these changes because they do not want to lose the support of their voters. So leaders are more likely to want to garner support simply because they want to keep the support and influence over their political parties in order to obtain like several benefits in the future, which is why it's unlikely they will slide off. Because of these reasons, side off.
Okay, great. Thank you, Diallo, for the fine speech. Now inviting Gafweb. Here.
And I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay, so I will be starting my speech. Oh, sorry. I am the whip of government, and my name is Terence. My pronouns are is he and him, and I prefer my POIs verbally. So I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So first of all, I'd like to state out what is the problem with the case of opposition. What have they been pushing on? So first of all, from what I heard on them is that basically by holding election pushes those governments to do to prove why they are worthy by solving such economic crisis, and those new political parties will basically give out plans about how they will solve this crisis better. First of all, yes, it is true that they are making these promises, but first of all, promises and results can be different. I may promise that I have a very good plan to solve this crisis. Well, is it proven that the results are actually how I plan it out? It's not guaranteed that the results are same as what you planned. More, and however, it's even worse that you guys are raising limited resources on such elections, even though you said that it's worth it to hear voices by wasting such resources. Then how are you going to solve economic crisis. Okay, so what if you listen to the voices of people? So how does that help you in economic crisis? Yes, you have a very good plan, a well-planned, constructed, a very good plan. Do you have the resources to undergo such plan? No, I don't believe it. And second of all, the things that they've been pushing on is that elections is to hear out the voices of people. So let me ask you something that is very logical. Do you need elections to hear out the voices of people? I'm pretty sure articles, newspapers exist. And moreover, at a situation where a nation is at economic crisis, are you sure that the voice of people will be other than please solve the economic crisis? Is this still needed for an election to be holden out just to hear people repeat saying, oh, I wish this economic crisis can be solved? You're basically wasting resources trying to get voice out of people that things you already know. And second of all, they've been saying that if you are suspending these things, basically government knows that people they will still hold their power, elections are not holding, and the government will slack off not doing their responsibilities. First of all, as I already said, suspended. As the Swiss speaker used the term skip. Skip and suspended is two different things, since that suspended can be brought back. Okay, next of all, why does government has the incentives to solve this economic crisis while elections are suspended? Well, it is basically true since that what is an economic crisis? Something that affects the nation, affects everyone in society, including politics. So during economic crisis, what happens if government don't solve them? As my second speaker has stated, the nation crumbles. It basically affects the government. You are incentivized to do it because it also threatens your position. What do you mean by if people can vote you out, you won't do your stuff? You're basically threatening yourself since that you're not solving something that threatens the whole government. Next of all, I would like to say that they have failed to prove to us why it is a worthy trade-off to waste your resources on elections instead of putting your resources in actual good use of economic crisis. As in our previous takers, we have been saying about how harsh is the environment of an economic crisis, why is it needed to be solved immediately, and why do people voices are actually mainly focused on wanting the government to solve such crisis. And in their side, they have been saying that it's a worthy trade-off of wasting your resources holding campaigns for such elections so that you can get the voices of people. They have failed to proven to us which anything that why is a worthy trade-off. That's why I think that this shouldn't be given credit. So next, they have been saying that people want a symbol of hope, of faith, something new they can rely on. Have you forgotten the fact that previous governments are also chosen by people? Those people are people chosen previous government. They are basically the current symbol in hope. What's the point of changing the symbol when you're in a crisis? That does not help the situation. What does it mean by you're suddenly changing the symbol? That means basically new political parties are taking over this situation. They are inexperienced of what happens previously. They do not know what did the previous government do. They basically just worsens the situation by making things very confusing. And they have failed to tell us that how are they going to solve this economic crisis? Where are your resources coming from? Economic crisis proves that government is facing a limited resources, a lack of resources. You say that you have been putting these resources in campaign to get the voices of people, but you have failed to tell us where can you get the rest of the resources so that you can come and solve this crisis. I don't see any analysis or mechanism of them of what happens after the election. But we have told you that in your side, after the elections, since that you're wasting these resources, you basically do not have enough resources for solving such crisis, and you have failed to respond to us of how are you going to solve this crisis. All you've been saying is, oh, our government can plan well. So plan well doesn't mean you have the resources and the outcome will be going to what you want. So sorry. So this also failed to tell us that why people want to prioritize elections. Yes, you guys have been repeatedly telling me that why people want elections, but you have failed to tell us why people want to prioritize elections over economic crisis. The motion clearly stated suspending elections because of the reason of economic crisis. You guys have been only telling us why elections are important. You guys have not telling us that why is elections so important. You are prioritizing it over economic crisis. And for my clash, so my clash is whether it is more important to put your resources into elections or it's important to put it in economic crisis. I think it's pretty normal, and even opposition can agree with us that you should put your resources into solving economic crisis. In all my previous takers and all of my previous speech, I've been saying about how important it is to solve an economic crisis and why government are incentivized to solve such crisis. That's why in our side, we have proven that it's more worth it to put such resources inside solving such crisis, and why government are always incentivized to do this. Even if elections are suspended, government will still fulfill their responsibilities. And in their side, what they have been telling us is that why elections are important, why voices of people are important. But putting into such resources, into such elections, are basically wasting the limited resources that you have into something you don't actually need. Since that I have already stated, voices of people, yes, they are important. But can you tell me what are the voices of people during an economic crisis? Well, it's obviously I want to solve this economic crisis. Are you telling me that maybe when your country is facing an economic crisis, maybe the voices of people, I want more schools, you'll focus your resources on building more schools instead of solving the economic crisis? No, I don't believe that's the case. Except for that, they have also overlooked the fact that voices can also be shown to government in different ways. Are you telling me that newspapers don't exist for voices of people? Are you telling me that articles don't exist so that voices can be shown out? Or are they telling me on their side, elections is the only thing that people can show out their voices? Well, I'm pretty sure that the nation is messed up if only voices of people can be listened through elections. So for my comparison is, in our best case is, since economic crisis is focusing on, it will be solved quickly and elections will be brought back, people's voices will be listened and we'll actually know what people want except for economic crisis. And I'll end my speech. And for that side is that people's voices are still the same. They're wasting resources on elections and things still repeat and they can't solve this crisis. And I'll finish here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kafut, for that fine speech. Now to conclude the substantive speeches, inviting Bob Wood here.
Hi, sorry, 1 second, setting up a stopwatch. Thank you. Hello, am I audible and visible?
Yes to both.
All right, thank you. Okay, pronouns are he and him. All POIs verbally, please. I will not be looking at the chat throughout the debate. And with all that out of the way, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. If I was stranded on a deserted island and I have the option of choosing between a crate of food and a floaty that lets me drift across the ocean in hopes of escaping, I think it's quite clear that I'm going to choose a solution that allows me to benefit in the long term. Look me in the eye and tell me that the short-term solutions are the most effective way to continue building up a country. The side that wins this debate here today is the side that benefits more people in a sustainable way, fulfills the burden, and in the long term, even if we take government at the best, that is clearly the side of opposition. In my speech today, I'll be providing several responses and rebuttals to all the speakers and substantive arguments provided by SAR government before moving on to our clash, why we win the clash with several ways, and lastly, the world case scenario, right? So what does the first speaker tell you from government, right? He talks a lot about how it's more important to focus on the economy, but realize something, right? Even if you solve it now, the economy is not something you can control forever. Stock prices go up and down on a daily basis, and offering short-term solutions to pour your resources into solving something that is not permanent is just simply opting for a solution that is not sustainable, and even more so, it's more prominent on government side as well. Government are complaining so much about how it's important and like resource consuming is like so hard to solve simply because they don't want to find an effective solution to do so, which side opposition has rehashed multiple times. He says that it's not the leader's fault that they have to be held accountable, country, but realize that they still have to be held accountable to some extent because they are the pinnacle of leadership in their country, meaning they have full control over various sectors, which include the economy. Second, the second speaker doesn't really seem to understand the incentives of already elected leaders and those that have yet to be elected, right? Which I will address later. He says that the current president will be happy that they are held accountable, and it doesn't matter if they do anything because the economy is going to crash anyway. What? Think about this logically speaking, right? I've already told you the leaders of the country are more likely to have more control over those that actually are involved in the economy, meaning they play an integral role in actually maintaining the economy of a country. They say that people don't want to die. However, there's no logical link about how people on our side are actually going to die if they simply want to place their vote and opinion about a certain matter. This is simply strong. And government doesn't see the claim that we're trying to make and push forward the fact about how important it is that we maintain democracy, right? They say they will try to fix the problem of economic crisis because they don't want to get kicked out of power. In status quo, right, realize this, right? Leaders don't try hard enough. Why do you think economic crisis is so prominent until today? And also, if leaders could get kicked out of power simply because people are unhappy, I think the world would have already descended into utter chaos due to democratic instability. Now, what does their whip tell you, right? He talks a lot about how, they are willing to take the resource trade-off because, they don't have enough resources to actually care for the country, right? And also about incentives, right? How we take this down, right? 3 ways. Number one, first, he says that holding elections pushes leaders to solve economic crisis, but he says that promises and results are different, and then we are less likely to see results in our side of the house. But then later he says that they're incentivized to do it because the economical crisis affects the position of the government. Thank you, but this is not exclusive to your side because the government in our world is also taking multiple incentives and methods to actually cater to the in our world and resources, right? This entire claim about winning the trade-off, right? Guys, please realize that the amount of money you pour into both issues is on a completely different level. How much are you paying people just to organize an election to go place a decision and stamp their thumb, right? It doesn't even compare to the funds the government in our world are also putting into solving the economical crisis. Therefore, this claim is not and I think it's not a waste of resources because realize that we've been telling you time and time again that this decision will actually benefit us in the long term, and therefore we are willing to factually take this trade-off. Furthermore, side government have not provided any substantive material and proper mechanism as to how to actually plan to solve the economic crisis in their world, because if we don't have resources, then you cannot simply assume that you have the resources to do so as well. And if our country does enough money to host a freaking general election, all our hopes on fixing the economy have already gone to hell. Lastly, right, they say it's not about their voices. Realize that they keep saying that it's the people that voice up their opinions are not important because they don't know anything about economy, right? Realize something here, right? It's not about their voices. It's about maintaining a policy that literally involves the rights of people, freedom of speech. Just remove it when the voices of people don't matter, and this is quite literally the worst case scenario in our, right? We tell you that even if there are other means to express opinions like newspapers or the press, it doesn't even matter because it's not realized in status quo that you can see today. We tell you that elections are the only way citizens' opinions can be expressed. Yes, your point. 3, 2, 1. Okay, moving on to some conversation, right? Okay. What does a world without elections look like then? You have to realize the importance of leaders in our country here today. We tell you that it's a world where democratic integrity is lost at sea, where people don't realize the importance of having a leader to govern a nation, and a world that's simply not sustainable in the long term, politically and economically. And we have given several structural reasons for this, right? Number one, governors are held less accountable in government world because there are no elections, and we likely won't see much change. Secondly, are an incentive for leaders to actually give back to the country, right? So why is there more change from outside, right? We tell you that because the public gets to speak up about their opinions regarding the country, and the leaders are going to be held more accountable, right? Accountability is something we've been rehashing, but government simply chooses to ignore this point. Because of this, right, even if it takes a longer time to overcome that crisis, our world is the one that ensures a principally just and sustainable way of doing so in the long term. Moving on to the clash, right, between democratic integrity and the usage of resources to solve the issue, right? We tell you that it's important we maintain democracy in the long run because we can still deal with the economical crisis in our world, even if it takes a longer time and better management of resources. It's not impossible. Don't let them get away with this paintage of like an image that's simply impossible to solve in our world, right? Better political stability can ensure public representation in the future, which is a world that advocates for freedom of speech surrounding self-nation. Yes, your point.
Yes, you have been saying that you guys have democracy in the long run. Now, basically, we're just suspending elections. We're not skipping elections. How does it mean that we do not have democracy in the long run?
Thank you. Do you not think citizens are going to be dissatisfied when their country just ups out of nowhere? As I told you, economical crises are so frequent that in modern day status quo, you see it every day because it's not something you can control. If citizens are simply not given the voice to speak when it happens so frequently, I'm quite certain they are going to start questioning their freedom of speech at all in democracy. Right. Furthermore, the importance of democracy is once again exacerbated once you realize the importance of leaders in the country. They are the ones that ensure citizens get what they need, and that's why our start today pushes for a proper selection of leaders to govern the nation in the long run. Why do we outweigh this, right? Three reasons. Number one, longevity. We clearly take this side of the debate as we take into account long-term effects, as well as maintain the same benefits of side government, because we actually deal with the economical crisis, even if it takes slower, right? We have proven to you why public representation is important in the long term as well, to prevent social discourse, etc., etc. Secondly, accountability, and this is exclusive to our side only, because our side holds leaders accountable towards actually giving back to their country, and we're giving you structural reasons to this. And when leaders realize this, right, they have to remember that they do not only preserve their reputation, but also fulfill what they have promised to give back to the country to avoid backlash. And lastly, scale, right? Realize how a much larger group of people are affected if you actually suspend elections, people on the ground, the future generations, etc., because they realize that they're not given the right to speak. Our side addresses the problem at the root by actually taking the time to select capable leaders. Even our worst case scenario, right? Even if the economic crisis lasts longer, so what? Government has not proved how they plan to solve it, and we tell you then our world is the one that benefits more people in the long term because we vote for capable leaders to solve the problem in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, We're for that fine speech. Now inviting reply to close up the opposition case. Here.
Visible and visible. Am I audible and visible?
Yes to both.
Thank you. So just give me a few seconds to set up my stopwatch. Okay. With that, I would like to start in 3, 2, 1. The only thing I heard from government is that they skewer the whole debate. Apparently, in an economic crisis, everyone dies and starves to death in a few weeks. Right? This is the world they paint on our side, and I think it's so uncharitable. Right? When they frame their own world as a world where people are happy to give up their political representation, a world where problems can just be solved by going with the flow. I tell you here, this is so uncharitable and unfair. Their whole case is built on this shaky, unrepresentative of this shaky, like unfair representation on both sides. I tell you here, the real thing that will actually happen is on our side, we get representation for every single person. We get actual developed decisions done, and we get actual people based on the people who are elected based on developed discussions on our side. Your side just says go with the flow, and I think it will work out, because on their side they're gonna die in a week, right? I tell you here, this is so unfair, uncharitable, and such an unfair characterization on our side. Their side is not only like uncharitable, right, but also incredibly like stingy. We have given you so many benefits, yet they tell us, and they just brush it off, saying that we don't have enough money or time. This is another example of like uncharitable characterization, right? When you can't fund an election, when you don't have enough money or time to fund an election, then like obviously your chances of change on your side is just like gone, right? When you think you have enough time and money to change without any sort of change on your side, is what's really surprising me here. Of course, on your side, everything's going to go fine. Yeah, on our side, we're all going to die in a few weeks. I think here that the only side that wins is the side that is on the world, not in bars or something, and actually gives realistic expectations to what's going to happen in the real life world. But let me tell you first that we weighed our benefits with like the price and the time that it takes, right? Well, since you like ignored it and kept telling me about how expensive it is, let me tell you again right now, right? We get discussion, we get the citizen's choice, we get a symbol of hope, we get accountability, we get a clear image of what the citizens want, and a leader we can put our trust in and is held accountable as well. So long as their only rebuttal to all of this is it's expensive and you cannot fund it, I think it is not worth it. The government will never actually change outside wins. But what else, right? We tell you here that not only are they uncharitable and not only are they stingy, but on their side, change will never happen so long as you continue to go with the flow and never actually pick the people that the citizens want, never actually give them political representation. Instead, when we point out the representation on their side, they ignore it. Apparently, on their side, people are happy to give up their political representation, which is just completely appalling to me. Obviously here, it's an opposition side win. I cannot preface it any further because of the fact that, number one, they are uncharitable and they skewer the whole debate. They should not even be credited in the first place because of the fact that what they say is completely unrealistic. They talk about golden gooses, they talk about all these random things, and they live in this la-la land where apparently people love to give up their political freedom. And I think here, this is incredibly like win, right? It's quite easy.
thinking of reply. Now to close up the entire debate, inviting Gov reply. Here.
Give me a second, please. Give me a second to organize everything first. Okay, I am the reply speaker of government side. I'm very proud. I'm Vernon. Okay, I'll be starting my reply speech in 3, 2, 1. As a reply speaker, it's really easy. I'm going to wrap up the whole debate and then introduce you to some of the things that why opposition's case is totally flawed and why our case and why our side actually wins. A few things I want to say about opposition side's case, right? Why opposition side is extremely flawed. So a few things I'm going to say. First of all, for their second speaker and first speaker, right, they didn't actually really rebut on our main argument too much. They lack a lot of analysis on their rebuttals. At the same time, they gave some of the questionable argument for their first speaker. So yeah, so let's talk about the next thing. The next thing is about exclusivity. So exclusivity, you said about having a lot of debates and discussion. We even gave you a POI about that. I'm pretty sure both sides actually can do it as well. You didn't prove why only your side is exclusive when it's actually exclusive to both sides. You say that the people is also discussing about it as well, but bro, our world is too, and everyone is going through all these things as well. So of course, people will be also discussing on these economical problems and all those. They at the same time they gave a very unclear and very bad answer to our POI that my third speaker gave. They also missed their own characterization, contradicting themselves. They said that suspend equals skip. The problem is, our word figure already proved to you that suspend and skip is totally different things. The next thing I'm going to say, they don't have enough analysis and statistics on why elections are more important than economical crisis. That's the most important thing that they lack. They don't tell us why these elections are more important than these economical crisis. So they still don't tell us on why having all these elections on where they can get all these resources if they are all used on these campaign elections. If they after these elections, right, why would they still have these resources that was limited because of those economical crisis? Why how would they get all of these resources after those? So at the same time, they're contradicting themselves. They already said that they have multiple campaigns for elections, and you say that all these multiple campaigns are all free. No, the multiple campaigns of course need a lot of money, and you're basically contradicting yourself by saying that because campaigns are very cheap and it's totally free for people. And then the whip speaker kept on ignoring our POI at the fact that they didn't even tell us whether it's an ignorance and decline or an accept. So moving to the next one, we did say they have money for elections, but they never showed us what happens after elections, right? I stated just now. And the clashes by my whip have also been proven that we won those clashes since their side didn't rebut against us at all. Their worst part is basically they didn't prioritize election is more important at all. So basically, in our side, right, we proved through layers of analysis why economic crisis should be prioritized, and this is the main point for this debate, and that's why it is shown that we win. And they also ended their speech with easy, which is founded quite offensive, bro. And let's move on. So opposition side neglect something. They don't tell us how they can solve these economic problems right now, and they messed up promises and results, as my third speaker and my second speaker already rebutted to those, and you guys actually messed up those things. They ignore the rebuttals that were stated by my second speaker, my third speaker as well, and even some things from me. They totally ignore all those things, making their whole case totally flawed. So what will happen in our world? The government has incentive to fix the economy despite what the opposition has told you, and they have more time and more resources than opposition will to actually fix it. Overall, the people are no longer pained by the economical crisis and still have food on their plate. So what will happen in their world? Basically, in their world, they take multiple weeks and months to hold these elections, which seems more demographic, overall resulting in a worse state, and citizens starve and don't get what they actually need. So in conclusion, we believe that we have successfully shown to you why an election should be suspended during economic crisis to improve on the most important thing in the country, the economy. So I am very, very proud to propose
Okay, great. Thank you so much everyone for the debate.